Welcome to Podomation, where we talk about all things automation and industrial cybersecurity. Podomation is brought to you by ISA, the International Society of Automation.
My name is Morgan Ford, and welcome to the next episode of Podomation. Today, we're going to be talking about a really big message for ISA, which is automation depends on people. And what better way to discuss that than talking about one of the oldest industries in agriculture and how automation can help make agriculture something better for farmers and everyone else involved. To do that, we've got some very special guests, and we're delighted to have the three of you. Guys, I will go through and have each of you introduce yourselves, and we'll get started. Leo, would you like to start?
Yeah, Leo Staples, been involved with ISA now for a long, long time, but my family also farms.
Jim?
Yeah, Jim McGlone. I've been involved with the ISA much of my career, and I'm known mostly as a cybersecurity guy and a control system guy. But I live on a homestead in a forest and farm the forest, and also all my neighbors are farmers, traditional old-fashioned farmers.
Ellie?
Sure, I'm Ali. I am a Canada researcher in cybersecurity and threat intelligence. And in the past few years, we have worked with many farmers, dairy owners that have been compromised, being attacked, and helped them to recover and respond back to those incidents.
Thank you. As you can see, each of our guests here have been involved in a different way with some of the similar things brought together by automation. So that's what makes this a unique thing for ISA to even discuss agriculture. I think it's very interesting. But to start, let's kind of give a brief overview about what is smart agriculture and how does it differ from traditional farming methods. Jim, can you talk a little bit about that for us?
Yeah, sure. So what's happening is a lot of the technology we use in other areas of industry or even on a geo aspect, things like GPS systems and GIS systems are all being integrated into smart farming. Some of the real interesting things that got my attention living in a forest and trying to figure out how to farm a forest are container farms. One of the things I found really interesting is the ability to actually put about 2.5 acres of production into a 40-foot shipping container, a Conex box, as they're commonly referred to, and being able to actually produce a magnificent amount of product, a very high quality product by avoiding all of the things that farmers have to deal with when your product is out in the woods. My challenge is I plant lettuce and the deer come and eat it. I plant corn and the raccoons tear it down. So it's interesting to watch these changes. So, there's a lot of things, a lot of automation, a lot of, I hear people talk about the Internet of Things, but there's just remote devices that are talking to centralized controllers that are ultimately being run by computers that are making decisions for farming, whether it's on a grand scale or on a very small scale. You see things like tractors today out in the field where the master tractor is following a GPS signal and there may not even be anybody in the cab. And then there are slave tractors running off of it in these giant fields out in the Midwest. So the technology is superior, it's necessary, and it's fantastic. I mean, so what we get by doing that is we get the ability to monitor and tune, if you will, the same way we would a PID loop or anything else in industry. We get the ability to collect data, analyze the data, and make decisions about every aspect of farming that we used to rely on, quite frankly, just common knowledge, right? So one farmer would ask another farmer, hey, do you got this bug? How are you dealing with it? Things like that. Do you have, I've got an area of the field that's a little swampy. How did you take care of that? And so now we actually have the ability on a very grand scale with all this automation to take care of basically to learn even more in great detail about how to actually tune the system, if you will, to produce the best product possible with the least amount of damage or damage is a good word, with the least amount of damage to the environment.
Interesting. And those are some really great examples. For those who don't know, Jim just informed us that he also wrote a position paper for ISA about smart agriculture. And so, Jim, thank you for listing all of those key points for us there with it too. That brings us kind of to the conversation about how that technology then helps with sustainability and environmental protection. Leo, can you talk about that?
You
What's going
bet.
on with smart agriculture?
Yeah, you bet. And this really builds on what Jim said. Using smart ag allows us to reduce our input costs by really targeting specific pests or fertilizer needs or disease in a field instead of the traditional reliance on high chemical usage across the entire landscape. And that is a big change, and you see that by using drones to fly a field, detect where there is a problem, and only treating that area. Even right here in our local county, the conservation district this year, instead of spraying all of the Corps of Engineer dams that they always spray with herbicide, they hired a company that had a drone applicator that it greatly reduced the cost of the application and actually went in and identified the woody plants and targeted only them. So that has an impact on our costs, but it also has a huge impact on the environment.
Yeah, if I could add something there, one of the things that I found really fascinating was the use of laser-based targeting in fields. So where you're pulling a piece of equipment behind you that used to have a whole bunch of chemicals in it now to treat or destroy unwanted plants. Now they actually have lasers running on gantries doing very precise positioning and basically zapping the weeds with a laser and the absolute zero use of any kind of weed killer. So really, the use of technology in this area is just immensely beneficial.
But how does that adoption of some of those types of things, how is that going to impact the economic viability of a small and medium-sized farm?
Well, it's the sustainability. Our small farms today have been pushed to the limits when you have equipment costs that are up 40, 50, 60%. We're in the process of buying a no-till drill. In 2019, when I first started looking at it, it was about $18,500. It's $43,000 now. It's those kind of things, and we'll get in later talking about then how we can actually transfer that knowledge from who are manufacturers to the actual users. But those costs are just making it cost prohibitive to actually for small and medium sized farms to exist.
Sure. And that's probably the biggest point of all of this, because I think when anyone starts to think about smart agriculture, the instant fear is kind of, oh my gosh, can I even afford to even think about something like that? Because it's kind of instilled for a farmer that, we're going to do this the basic way. But that's a really good point that the price of regular equipment has gone up that much. You kind of have to think a little bit outside of the box to make it work. So thank
Yeah,
you for that.
that's really interesting. That's a conversation that I have with these farmers that are basically. I'm 66, and the one right behind me is that age. The other one's a couple years younger, and the one to the east of me is about 8 years older than me. And they're running old International harvesters and Ford tractors, and I mean they have tractors that, quite frankly, are ancient. And they plant corn, they plant soybeans, they plant a lot of basically grasses that they harvest for feed. And they grow animals. But the reality is that those guys can't make. I've got an expensive green tractor, and for the amount of area that I'm trying to work now, they want me to spend $75,000 more than I spent on my very expensive green tractor for a bigger tractor because I keep breaking the tractor that I have. I'm asking it to do too much. And I can't make that decision. So the challenge for all of us is to figure out how to help companies do that. or help organizations or individual farmers even make those decisions.
Right. And that kind of goes back into the next question, which is what are the social impacts? That's a piece of the social pie, but let's kind of get into that a little bit more. What are some of the other things that are going on the social side? Leo, I'm going to give that to you.
Yeah. So I guess, and I don't know if this is where you wanted this or not, Maureen, but the big thing is how do we move this technology into our small and medium farms? And
Mm-hmm.
as a tech guy, I love technology, but what I see when I talk to, I'm 66 like Jim. The guy that bales my hay is 74. He talks to me every year about doing no-till planting of his cover crops, but he can't make himself do it because it's not what he's done for those 70 something years. But it's how do we get that technology? We put it all in all the new equipment that's out there. But the big thing farmers face is the hurdle of adopting it because in many cases, the manufacturers and certainly their local distributors don't understand it. I've visited with a couple of young farmers here that I know, and they buy swather equipment, tape to cut hay, and it's got auto steer on it, but they don't know how to make it work. No one knows how to train. So it's the cost of that equipment and then the inability of the dealers to support the technology. So we need to find a way to do that. I'm in a little different position. I just bought a new tractor this year. The dealer I bought it from, we've bought from for 30 years. I have his personal phone number. He farms with this equipment. I can call him at any time, and I have when there's issues with it. But most of the big dealers that are out there, and it's not green and yellow, so I won't go there. But they don't have that ability, and so if you've got one tractor like Jim and I, well, we've got two now, and your tractor's down, you're down, and there's not spares waiting around. So it's a big hurdle to get our traditional small and medium-sized farmers to adopt this new technology.
So actually, Leo, you bring up a great point. So my local green store, I have to tell them what to do. I have to tell them what's wrong with my tractor. I've got to get it on my trailer and haul it down there. Very irritating, especially when it doesn't work and I've got to use winches to get it up on the trailer. I'm not in a good mood, right? and I get down there only to find out that, that's a problem that should have been identified. The vehicle should have been able to tell me it was having that problem. And it's irritating because, the design's not good enough and the shop can't repair it. The other challenge, and this goes to who we're relying on for this type of technology, and this is a big deal, right? So for years, I worked for a major automation vendor out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I won't name them. I'm trying to be as neutral as I can here. But one of the reasons people bought from us is because if something went wrong technically, we showed up and solved the problem. And that, when you're making automobiles and your automobile line shuts off, the cost of that can be, over $1 million very quick in minutes, quite frankly. It can be the difference between being profitable that quarter and not. And so you got to have vendors that you can trust. And in Ohio, as a matter of fact, I think it was a class action suit and the Attorney General of the state of Ohio got involved. There was a tractor vendor who botched it badly, and the tractors wouldn't start in the spring and wouldn't run. And basically, the farmers, and I want to say there were 800 of them that had to get together in the state of Ohio and sue the company to get the right to service their tractors. You can't do that. The vendors have got to get better. I know that wasn't on our list of things to talk about, but the vendors have got to get better, period. And the vendors have got to teach. People in the field have to be able to service their equipment. So we've got to find a way to teach people how to do that in the field.
Actually, Jim, I'm going to say this is exactly what we were looking to talk about because, in fact, the point is automation depends on people. And so it's not just the technology, it's the vendor has to be better acquainted with it. The farmer has to be better acquainted with it. And everybody has to work together to work with the technology. a lot of times when you talk about automation of any kind, people worry machines are going to take over for my job. This is a really large example of, in fact, the machine's not going to take over your job, because the machine needs to get better at one to even help you with your job and to do what you need it to do. So it's a really good point, I think, for our overall messaging of what we're trying to put out here. In smart agriculture, we're not looking to take over the role of the farmer. We're trying to ease the role of the farmer. So we need one, the technology is there, but we need to get better about how the vendors are selling it, what they're due to service it. Those are some of the gaps. So I think you've identified those well. But, and also, one thing that we haven't talked about is, with any technology, what's the main concern that comes in next? Cybersecurity. Whoever thought that farming and cybersecurity would have an intersect? Here it is. Ali, would you like to talk about that a little bit more?
Sure, absolutely. And that's quite sophisticated and interesting area, right, to us to me specifically. Leo and Jim highlighted about the temptation to adopt the new technologies to increase performance and productivity. At the same time, the willing to keep the processes as they were before, because we are talking about owners and people in the field that may not be very familiar with the technology. They can see the benefit of adoption of technology, but they want it to still stick to their old processes of the working, right? So looking at this adoption from cybersecurity point of view, um, smart agriculture is making a ripe environment for the attackers in terms of we are looking at the businesses which are small and medium size, but they are having quite a complex attack surface. So let me explain that. Traditionally, when we look into the businesses that are focused on OT, for example, say oil and gas pipelines, the providers there are usually big businesses that they understand and they have staff and resources to work and focus on IT and security, right? And when you come to like smaller businesses, they are usually either focused on IT or OT, which means they either have the data, digital data only, and they mainly focus on that, or they are just OT operators with no connection to the digital world, right? So a smart ag and the adoption of technology in agriculture put them in a borderline where you would see tractors that are like computers that are processing tons of data. And we are talking about not only farm data, but satellite data, communication data, all those things running on the field. At the same time, these smart devices are connected to a network that network has zero protection, like default passwords are being used, shared with, say, the network of the devices are shared with the home network, that is like putting an environment that creates a large and sophisticated attack surface for the attackers. So when we talk about risks in cybersecurity in general, we need to look into two aspects: vulnerabilities and threats, right? These two, the combination of vulnerabilities and threats, are creating risk. Specifically in ag food tech, right? The vulnerability is coming from this sophisticated attack surface. You would see on the IT side that there are systems that have been never patched. They're using default passwords or easy to guess passwords. Or I have been to many, many farms that the password has been written on the board, right? And they are having like calls and the password is just shown on the background, right? So those are like that the environment on the IT side. But on the OT side, we are looking to at vendors that they are not adhering to even basic cyber security requirements. I have been into many farms that the farmers are telling me that we have dropped the firewall because that vendor told us that our tool is not working unless that you drop your firewall, right? And we are talking about like basic cyber security protections like the firewalls, right? So what I'm trying to highlight is when you look into the weaknesses and vulnerabilities, there is a big range of weaknesses on the OT, on the IT, and in combination in between. But how about the attack side? How about the threat side? I mean, it could be that we are looking at a vulnerable industry, but if there is no attacker interested in that, then there's no issue, right? But it's not the case in the ag food, right? So there are three categories of threat actors that we are seeing actively working in this field. The first group are cyber criminals, right? So cyber criminals are not differentiating, discriminating between different targets. If you are an easy target, they are going to compromise you, drop a ransomware, or cause a disruption in your business and try to get use of your businesses, right, or your money, right? So that's the concept behind all cyber crimes. One of the conversations I hear a lot from those farmers who have been impacted. They are asking me that, Ali, I am a small farmer in Southern Ontario. Why anyone is interested in attacking me? Why they're not coming and attacking your lab, right? And I am like, for them, it doesn't matter who you are or where you are located. If you are not protected enough, if they can attack you in 1 hour and can attack me in 3 hours, they come after you, not me, right? So that's the basic economic rationale of cyber attack, right? That if you are the easy target, you will be targeted first, right? So that's one sort of the attack groups that we have there, like cyber criminals, opportunistic. The other group are actually state-sponsored hacking teams, right? That you would not expect to see them in this sector, right? But when we look at the clients and work with them, we observe especially two groups like Chinese and Iranian hacking groups that are very active in this environment. They're creating backdoors, they're creating remote access, and even they are trying to test, for example, in chicken bars, I don't know you're familiar or you're aware of that or not, but in chicken bars, if you can change the temperature for only 10 minutes, all the chickens would die, right? So if a state-sponsored nation actor wants to disrupt the supply chain in the food, those are the best targets. And we see active probes and active backdoors being made by both Chinese and Iranian hacking teams in Canada, in North America, specifically where we are operating, right? And that's like the second group that are really interested in probing, finding these vulnerabilities, right? And the third group, which are quite recent, I mean, we have seen the activities in the past 2 years, are animal activists. They are trying to get into the farms, either stealing footage or sometimes making the owner to come forward and confess about animal cruelty, right? And the thing about these animal activists is, unlike cyber criminals and even these state-sponsored hacking teams, that we have a playbook. We know how to deal with them as a cybersecurity professional. If it is cyber criminal, you know what they are after. You can work with them. At the end of the day, you pay the ransom and you get your data back, hopefully, right? That's the worst case scenario, right? But when you talk with these animal activists, their objective is not to gain any of those monetary activities. They are not coming forward on a table to do any negotiation if we cannot find a solution for that, right? And they are quite a sophisticated attack vector because they are mainly attacking the targets that they know them very well. They probably know the business, know the owner, very familiar, so they know where to hit to have to cause the maximum pain, right? So looking at that, like these three categories of the attackers and that wide attack surface, the vulnerabilities that we talked about, this is becoming an environment that uh, it is just a matter of trying and getting into that environment and having the malicious intent to compromise, right? And when I go to conferences, because I'm going to many of these ag-food conferences that talk about cybersecurity, and one of my first questions is how many of you have been attacked? And like a few hands go up. And then my next question is how many of you are monitoring? I mean, having any security monitoring in place? And no hands goes up, right? And my
Right.
question for most of the time is like, you are not monitoring, you are not saying. And that's the main concern, Wherever we go to any investigation, you know, I mean, probably others can jump in and pull money, provide more information. When you see a ransom type of attack, this is usually the last step of the attack, which means, when as an attacker, you drop the ransomware, you know that the farmer or the owner would be aware, they would call for help, right? So you would do that at last, which means you first try to get access, you first try to create your backdoor, you first try to steal all the information is valuable for you, including credit card and financial information. And when you are done and this target has no other value for you, you drop your ransomware, right? And say, okay, let's get the last bit of it, right? And most of the time, I would say like 90% of the time in this ag food industry, we get engaged at that stage. So they see a ransom message and they call us. And then we go and investigate and we find like attackers have been there for 2 years, 3 years, right? And they have done everything. And quickly, these cases become very complicated because if a private information has been stolen, you have to inform those people who have been impacted. if any banking information have been impacted, you have to inform the banks, right? And that would create, I mean, there was a survey by Accenture that's in Canada that they find 60%, 60% of small medium businesses go bankrupt after cyber attack, right? And we have seen that, especially for the farmers who have been compromised, this is quickly becoming a significant cost of operation, not only to secure themselves, but dealing with all those legal cases that comes one after the other, right? Privacy cases, damage cases, all of those that goes, right? And most of these farmers don't have any cyber insurance or any protection on that side, so they are left alone with the budget that they have from their operation to pay for all these costs. So I think I can stop there and get Jim and Leo jumping in and talk, right, about what they see.
Can I add something to that, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
Ali?
Sure.
So I think that one of the challenges we have here, we were talking about social and economic type barriers and challenges. Cybersecurity is tough. Hiring the people to do it. You want to hire me to come in and do an assessment of your facility. I go into a refinery. I get paid a lot of money an hour to be there.
Sure.
And farmers don't have the margin, like grocery stores and wastewater treatment facilities, the margin's not there. People say stuff about farmers all the time that just isn't true. Their equipment is equipment. They have to buy it just to stay alive, just to keep their business floating. So cybersecurity risk is something, quite frankly, the vendors need to take on. I think in this marketplace, the vendor who comes out with the tools that actually provides a cybersecurity from end to end for whatever their application or system is wins. And I would argue that, and I go to cybersecurity conferences throughout my life and have spoken at quite a few of them. And I tend to be the guy who people want to argue with. But I really think this is the point where people like me should be put out of business. I think that a vendor that comes along and says, I have a super tight solution, I'm handling all the regulation, I'm handling the cybersecurity, much like I talked about that automation company out of Milwaukee, I'm the guy who shows up and makes sure it works. I'm the guy who makes sure that you don't get attacked. The vendors that do that will win in this war, in this battle.
Okay.
Because a farmer, you can't ask them to learn all this technology, hire people who know how to write code, hire people who know how to speak up very complicated machines, keep the firmware up to date. The farm doesn't have except for the really large corporate farms, they don't have a margin for somebody like that. So the reality is that the vendor's got to do it, and the vendor's got to find a way to control the cost to solve the problem. And if that can happen, then we can actually change the industry for the better.
Right, Jim. I mean, I can share you more insights on that, and we're going to conversation now, right? I don't know how much time we have here, but I have heard that a lot, right? That's the vendor responsibility, and that's what whenever I have been called on the scene, the first thing that they tell me is why that vendor are not responsible for it. First of all, when you look into the cybersecurity and like the digital world in general, usually cybersecurity, not usually, always cybersecurity is the owner responsibility. If your Microsoft provided, I'm giving an example here, right? Email account is being hacked. It's not Microsoft responsibility, right? It's your responsibility. You're using the Outlook, using their technology, right? But you would be eventually responsible for any damage, right? Or any loss. First, second, I have been on the cases. I can share you that when the attack happens, even identifying whose vendor is responsibility to react becomes quite sophisticated. So I have been in the cases that, yes, exactly, they are pointing to each other. I have been in a dairy farm, for example, right? The IT servers have been ransomed. The milking machine have been ransomed, right? And then we had all those feeding devices. They have been ransomed as well. And we are talking about 4 different vendors.
and no one even dare to touch, because they are like, we are bound by privacy regulation. I cannot touch the other vendor data. And you know what was end up? The farmer was like, Ali, go and do whatever you can. And I just ignored the saying, just get the customer to sign the agreement. And I was like, I am doing it, right? It doesn't matter. I need to get him back to the business, right? So what I'm saying is like it's quite complicated, unless that you are working only with one vendor, right? And saying I'm doing everything with that one vendor. And on the other side, I have worked with the vendors. I mean, there are vendors who want to do that, right? But you will see that quickly the additional cost of cybersecurity make their product unaccessible, right? So, for example, if you have a vendor who wants to offer security monitoring of their, say, a smart or drones or tractors, right? So that means that they need to have a security operation center, people sitting there and monitoring, and that means additional costs going down to clients, right? So what I'm trying to highlight is the solution, and that's what I was trying to advocate in Canada for years, is the same way that government is subsidizing biosecurity for the farmers, they need to step in and come forward with a solution. This is a matter of national security, right? If the food chain has been impacted, it's a matter of national security. And we are seeing that state-sponsored hacking groups are interested, right? So, I mean, we try to push, we try to tell. I mean, you are right. That profit margin is not there, right? We cannot expect the farmers, right, to come with the solutions or to build it, right? But the reality is they are getting attacked. And when they are getting attacked, somebody needs to step up and help, right? And the cost of instant response, as you know, is much higher than prevention. If we can help them to deploy these preventive technologies, right, make them more secure, right, at least to the level that script kiddies or like lone hackers cannot cause disruption, that would aid a lot, right? That would help a lot of them, right? But unfortunately, we are not there. As I said, in Canada, we are trying to push, saying that government should come in, step in, come with either aids, match funding, the same way that they are protecting the farmers' biosecurity, they got to protect from cybersecurity point of view, right? And the last point is, I find it very difficult for the farmers to even understand the cybersecurity claims that the vendors are making, right? And that's again a
Right.
big lack that I was trying to push to a standard organization. I was talking to ISA and Steve and others as well, right? That guys come with some sort of a standard that they will say this vendor is level A and the other vendor is level B and level C, right? So that people can understand. We cannot go and say that this vendor meets ISO 27001 and the other one needs blah. You're just confusing everyone in the field, right? But if we can come with like more sector specific, easy to understand security standard that vendors can meet and they can put it on their products that they meet level A standard, right? And at the same time, it is easy for the farmers to make a judgment. And we work with the insurance companies, right? And tell them that insurers, please give incentive for the farmers who are using a better secure technology. That could change the environment. But at the moment, on the field, we are talking about an industry which seems to be quite having a lot of vulnerabilities, and it is just a matter of attackers deciding to attack, not about like it's protection or it's going to cost them. It's just they are not interested on that farm yet. The minute they become interested, they will not compromise, right, and attack them.
I think that's a really good discussion about not only the social, the economic issues, the vendor issues, and the challenges in the regulation space. So there are areas where I think regulation, carrot and stick type method, try to stay away from the stick, but find a way to use carrots to make it easier. Right now, I think a lot of people look at, and I'll take my neighbor right behind me who's my age. Great guy, fantastic man, love him dearly, and salt of the earth kind of person, right? And he drives a tractor that's more than 30 years old and has no urge to buy a modern tractor to make his life easier because of all the things you just said, right? Is instantly, I got to know things that I know nothing about. And we've got to find a way to balance that. And I completely understand the challenge on cost. I used to be the vice president of a business And people argued with me that they wanted a controller that was solely built in the United States. So instead of building it in Guangzhou, China, I started building it in Lynchburg, Virginia, at a contract manufacturer there. I added $4 to the cost. And because of my corporate requirements, I had to charge $8 more for a made in the USA device that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars. And the reality is, no one would buy it. I did what they asked.
True. True. Yeah, true.
And so I completely get that argument about cost. And maybe there is a way through regulation with carrots, with the carrot as opposed to the stick approach, to find a way to make it easier. Right now, it's all stick, right? There's an article I think it was in Forbes recently, about the burnout at the chief information security officer level that's going on. The CISOs are like, I quit. I can't do this. It's just insanity. We've got to make that easier, period. And we got to find a way to do it, not only for industry in general and for my mom. My mom's 88 years old and on the internet every day. We got to make it easier, but we've got to make it. Hey, luckily she has a cybersecurity guy that has a back door into her computer and can fix things when she messes up. But farmers don't have that. They don't have a cybersecurity guy. They don't have somebody who can reach out and touch. So it's a challenge, and they don't understand. You're asking a guy who's working 24-hour days, 4 or 5 days in a row to bring in crops or to get them in the ground, asking him to learn about firewalls and remote access and stuff like that. It just isn't going to happen. So somebody's got to do it. And I don't know what that looks like. Does the government find a way to actually come up with a regulation that vendors have to meet, that supplies, maybe there's a vendor out there that, I'm not going to name companies, but maybe there's a vendor out there that wants to step up and say, hey, I want to build a device that I can install at the farm that protects the farm, and we'll monitor it remotely. There are some companies out there that have single pane of glass type systems now, where I used them. I've installed them in facilities where the firewall and the remote access system and even the DNS for the internal network. And in some cases, they're a pretty major switch, all built into one device. And they babysit it for me when I don't have the time to babysit it. That type of technology has merit. And we need to continue to pursue that to help these guys actually, put something in that's set up by default to prevent the kind of attacks that you described so well, Ali.
Well, team,
Well, I'm with Ali too, on this point of, even if you had that technology, there's a lot of people who don't even realize that that's a problem because it hasn't hit their back door yet. I feel strongly that you would need some sort of policy regulation change to give some sort of incentive or something to get some of these folks more on board with even knowing about it. There's so many people in the world who are, cybersecurity doesn't impact me. And I mean, this is a great example of cybersecurity impacts everybody. And you've really got to raise a little bit of awareness of pinpointing that down for somebody who's in the field bringing in crops every day, kind of a thing. You guys have more of a background in some of that stuff, so it's really interesting to get the dynamic discussion going. But at the same time, there's that whole concept of getting the workforce development into that play, and I think that's where government and policy changes absolutely could help. Leo, did you have anything to add there?
Yeah, and you, all three of you just said something that was perfectly aligned with what we're seeing. Jim talked about the cost of being able for farmers to be able to afford a technical person to provide that. I will tell you, they don't exist. The water sector, National Rural Water, is currently doing a pilot project for cybersecurity circuit riders. It's some work that we started in a project out in Wyoming. And the reason they're doing that is that, just like the farmer, that guy and gal out there that's maintaining our water and wastewater systems, they don't have that ability to step forward. So from a regulatory perspective, our schools need to be set up to where that they teach people and build that in. The joke I've always said is I don't need an engineer, a technician, or technologist that knows that Dick Morley invented the PLC. I need somebody that can do something with the darn thing. From a regulatory perspective, the biggest challenges we face in this area are right to repair, the right to farm, and then some of the EPA regulations that sometimes we as farmers question: are these based on actual science from the field, or is something somebody setting in a lab? Stuff doesn't scale up always, and so you've got to ask some of those questions there. Farming, even today, is a very small percentage of greenhouse gases that it contribute overall. We all want to do things to make it better, but we need to give the tools. There's no reason that since I can take my OBD2 scanner and scan my pickup and find out when there's a problem, that I can't plug it into my tractor, which both of them, by the way, have ports, and look and say, it's the thermocouple in the exhaust manifold, or it's the baler's not seeing the gate close. That's very simplistic, and yet we've had that pushback. Jim mentioned the lawsuit that was out there. We've been pushing for this. We've got to get away from that.
If I can add a few things on these common points that Leo and Jim making, first, the impact of the cyber attacks are now going beyond and above what we have seen in the past. For example, in August, there was a ransomware attack that leads to the deaths of a cow and a calf in Germany. It was publicly reported. So these attacks are causing actual deaths of the livestock, right? So we are not talking about just the systems being impacted, but the livestock themselves, right? But the point that Leo was making about those professionals do not exist is quite important. I have worked with many farmers, right? That one of the farmers was telling me that Ali, that she has been actually attacked, right? She was telling me that Ali, I was getting all these inputs that you need to change your password, you need to make it complex, all those things, but I have been attacked because this machine, and she was pointing to her milking robots, doesn't have the interface to change the password, right? Or she was just talking about that feeding system. They were like, how can I get this updated, right? So what I am seeing is there is a big disconnect between the advice that cybersecurity professionals are giving and the operation on the field, So for example, whenever I presented these two risks to the owners, right? The risk of your vendor would not be able to remotely connect to your robot, right? And help you because you have changed the password, it's more difficult, and the risk of attacks, right? Because of those default passwords. They always say that the risk of my vendor would not be able to help me is more than the attackers, right? And that's the actual business risk. So as a cybersecurity professional, you cannot go and advise them to change your password. That doesn't work. These devices you cannot change the password on, right? Or these devices you cannot update them. They don't have that feature, right? And that's like the gap that Leo was talking about, right? That when we are trying to give advice to the farmers, we need to understand how this works. They are not office workers that they are sitting on a computer. And by the way, they have a setting that they can just go and change the password there. It's not that way. It's not working that way, right? So for example, you would see that when we are working with these farmers, we try to avoid telling them to just change your password or keep the system updated, because we know that in reality, that's not possible. Solutions such as enable two-factor authentication, if that is possible, is a better option, right? Or for example, you're looking at Australia. Australia has started creating a secure data exchange for the farmers, right? So that's like a cloud that all the vendors that collecting data from the farmers are uploading their data there. So nothing is stored on the farm. They're all on that data exchange. And every software or solution provider would just hook their solution to that cloud, right? That data exchange. And then they are responsible for securing the data exchange, right? So we are not removing the risk. Of course, there is a risk that the data have been stolen from the time that they are on the farm up until they get to the cloud, but we reduce the attack surface significantly, right? So you are only vulnerable for the data that you're producing real time. Everything that's already produced and stored are already protected, right? At the same time, The vendors who are providing these kind of solutions, they don't need to deal with every single farmers and find how they can build a solution. They are just connecting themselves to that cloud, and that cloud is providing secure access to whatever service is required. And the cost of maintaining and running it is significantly low because it's just among all the farmers in that nation, right? Distributors will bid like, I don't know what's the subscription fee, but last time it was like close to 25 Canadian dollar, which is like, I don't know, 15 US dollar, right? They were getting that data exchange, which was sufficient for like most of their businesses. No data was on premise, right? Everything was on the cloud, and everyone was kind of happy, right? You would not see even attackers going there because what they can get, nothing, right, from those businesses. So you will see there are solutions here that are economic, and they are providing reasonable level of protection, but they have not been deployed yet, right?
You know, this is one of the problems that we've been talking about here is the same problem that everybody who starts applying technology gets into. Doesn't matter what industry it is, doesn't matter where it is. What happens is we used to build machines. Okay, I'm going back to Morley days. We used to build machines with relays and push buttons and selector switches and gauges, all right, and pilot lights. And I used to run a nuclear power plant like that. I was a reactor operator for the United States Navy for 9 years, and I ran a nuclear power plant that had some very cool gauges, some very cool pilot lights and switches on it, and I had to know how all of it worked on that control panel. And much of that today has been replaced by a computer screen, as it has in every industry. The challenge we have is we're taking technology that wasn't designed necessarily for an application without all of the IT wrappings around it and using it to control machinery. And I need the machine to work like a machine. I need it to do things and maybe do it a little bit better, but I still need it to work like a machine. I need it to turn on when I need it to run. I need it to do things. And you know, I have a relatively new F-150 pickup truck. I'm driving down the road. For some reason, there's a Wi-Fi spot where that thing tends to sync, and my entire dashboard cluster shuts off when it resets the BIOS in the system. Luckily, the truck doesn't stop. You know, I'm going 60 miles an hour down a country road, and the entire dashboard shuts off. There are no gauges there. It's a computer screen. That's insane. All right. So there's we got to balance this with farming. It's a challenge for us to figure out how to do this well. Don't get me wrong. I was coming home from my Amish hardware store not too far from here, not too long ago. Well, about a year and a half ago. And they had, to Leo's point, they actually had a drone up, one of those big hexa drones up that can carry like, I don't know, it carries 100 pounds or more of chemicals. And what was amazing was here's this guy with a pickup truck. He's unloading the drone, and there's an Amish buggy in front of him. And I went, oh, I have to stop. The Amish had hired this guy to do targeted fertilizer to the field. Instead of going in the field with their rudimentary equipment or just sacrificing that part of the field, they experimented with that idea. And the Amish guy looked at me and goes, I know you, I see you all the time. And so we had this great conversation. And he's like, I don't understand any of this technology, but this is amazing. For very little money, for very little overall cost, for very little disturbance to my crop, these guys can fertilize the few areas in my field that need to be fertilized, and the cost benefit to me is significant. And I'm having that conversation with an Amish guy. That's just mind blowing, right? So that we can do this. We just have to do it in a way that everybody benefits. I think that's a fair way to put it.
I think so too. I think this is a great conversation, and it kind of brings us to our last point here, which is what do we feel like the future trends are going to be? Maybe not necessarily what we think should happen to make a solution, but where do we feel like it's going? Do we feel like this is only going to continue to blow up, or do we feel like there's going to be some different things that happen here?
I think we're going to find all kinds of new ways to do things and help farmers. But quite frankly, not everyone will be able to take advantage of it. I have hope that with some of the things that are happening in the administration is coming into the White House, that they'll focus on some of these areas. That I know they're interested in reducing the amount of glyphosate used in applied to fields and stuff. There is the potential that with the right regulations, the right socioeconomical pressures, that we can actually make some significant strides, at least in the United States. These container farms that I was talking about earlier were developed for the cannabis market originally, and now people are buying them to grow vegetables for high-end supermarkets or high-end restaurants, right? The people who want to have really perfect vegetables for their customers and stuff. I think there's plenty of room for new ideas, inventive things. There's a lot of vertical agriculture going on. There's a lot of buildings being converted to agriculture. I know in China they're doing some crazy things. They have a pig farm that is a multi-story building, and instead of windows, they have cement that comes up like a parking garage would, and then they have open air, and they're growing pigs in a high rise downtown, in an industrial area downtown, but downtown growing pigs, raising pigs in an industrial and in a city environment, which is crazy, but what a great idea, right? There are all kinds of things that we can do better, and I think there's a lot of room for innovation and for I want to see. Man, I want to see the 20 somethings get excited and want to get in here. And these are places where I think the ISA can help, leaning on the universities, spending time with, the technical schools, helping the vendors find a path forward. I think there's a lot of opportunity for just wild success and being able to grow much more food with much less impact to the environment.
Yeah, the integration of biotechnology into some of the smart ag type environment, that's some of the things we're watching and how we do. We're a regenerative farm. We raise Berkshire pigs on pasture. They're rotated every 2 weeks. They don't see that pasture for maybe once or twice a year at most. Our input costs are low. The pigs are high in vitamin D because they see sunshine. They're happy. The meat quality is just insane. And the last litter that we ran through, we used no antibiotics because they didn't need it. We use science. We test. If we don't just randomly throw stuff out there, which is just different than how its agriculture has done, being certainly in my lifetime. So implementation of the technology, and as we learn new ways with some of the biotechnologies to do this, it's what keeps me excited about it, and I'm very pleased because both my kids and their spouses are involved in it too, because it's something that they see so much making a difference.
Well, see, Jim, there you go. The Staples family is taking up the innovation task for the next generation. Ali?
Sure, yes. I mean, of course, I'm just going to talk more about like cybersecurity aspects of that, right?
Hmm.
And I heard you talking about like AI threat of replacing humans, right? And the force. But I don't believe that we will get to a stage that AI or machine learning or autonomous systems would be able to replace the core activities that the humans are doing, especially in this sector. But I hope that with more autonomous cybersecurity system development, especially for the systems that we are talking about in this industry, which are like they do not require sophisticated protection, but they require a level that just make them difficult enough for the attackers to target. I would say I am hoping that with these more autonomous cybersecurity solutions development and deployment, we would be able to see that these cybersecurity protection mechanisms become much cheaper and affordable, and would be able to be deployed and serve for this field, right? I don't know how long would it take, but I can clearly see that the cost of building and maintaining these solutions are dropping significantly, right, with the adoption of AI. And I hope to see that day that those are being used to provide protection, cybersecurity protection for all farmers.
Yeah, those are really good points too. I think all of this comes back to the same point, which is automation depends on people any way you look at it. And I don't see that changing as a trend either. So thank you guys today. Great discussion. All the services of agriculture, where it's going with cybersecurity is definitely an ISA hotspot. And I appreciate all of your opinions and kind of going through some of this in a little more detail so we can both understand the technology that's going on in smart agriculture, what some of the issues are in the policy area, what's going on in cybersecurity, and what can we look to see for the future. Great discussion. Thank you for your time. We'll see you next time on Podomation.
Take care.
Bye.
This has been Podomation, brought to you by the International Society of Automation. Thanks for listening, and remember to subscribe and review wherever you listen to podcasts. It really helps people to find our content. Podomation is produced by me, Liz Neiman, and Morgan Fora at ISA. Our music is by Mixer Drummer and has been licensed from Pond 5.